The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the usual sounds of a new session. Representatives from dozens of species filled their assigned seats, their different languages creating a symphony of voices that the translation devices worked hard to organize. But something was wrong. Ambassador Theorix of the Vorthak noticed it first. The human section was empty, not just the main representative chair, but all 12 seats that humanity had earned through their contributions to galactic society. The blue and green banners that usually hung behind their area were gone. Even the small human-designed air recyclers that had been installed for their comfort had vanished. "Where are the humans?" Theorix asked his aide, a younger Vorthak named Kellen. Kellen checked his datapad, his large eyes scanning the information quickly. "I do not know, Ambassador. Their last communication was 3 days ago." It was a standard diplomatic message confirming their attendance for today's session. Across the hall, General Krathos of the Krathari military noticed the same thing. His red-scaled face showed confusion as he looked at the empty human seats. The humans were always early to these meetings. They liked to prepare and talk with other representatives before the formal session began. Their absence was unusual. "Computer, contact the human embassy," General Krathos commanded his personal device. Unable to establish connection, the computer replied in its calm voice. "Human embassy communication systems are offline." This got the attention of other representatives. The Zalani trade minister Vex tried his own communication systems. The insect-like creature's antennae twitched with worry as he got the same result. "All human communication channels are dark," Vex announced to the growing crowd of concerned representatives. The session was delayed for 2 hours as the council tried to contact humanity through every possible method. Messages to human colonies went unanswered. Calls to human ships in space found nothing. Even emergency frequencies that had never been silent since first contact remained quiet. Ambassador Theorix requested permission to access the Galactic Monitoring Network. What he found made his blood run cold. The network showed no human activity anywhere in known space. No ships moving between planets. No communications between their worlds. No energy signatures from their cities. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. 200 billion humans do not just disappear. But as the hours passed and search teams were sent to nearby human worlds, the impossible became reality. The first report came from the human colony of New Terra, just 3 light years away. "The planet is there," reported Captain Joule of the survey ship Star Runner. "The cities are there. The roads, the buildings, even the parks are all in perfect condition. But there are no humans. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no damage. They are just gone." More reports followed throughout the day. Every human world was the same. Empty but intact. The power system still worked. The computers still ran. The gardens still grew. But humanity had vanished without a trace. By evening, the council had confirmed that every human presence in the galaxy had disappeared. Not just the people, but their ships, their space stations, and even their personal belongings. It was as if they had packed up their entire civilization and left during the night. Ambassador Theorix spent the night reviewing recordings of previous council sessions. He watched months of meetings, looking for clues about what had driven humanity to this extreme action. What he found disturbed him more than their disappearance. In session after session, he watched the humans propose reasonable solutions to galactic problems. They suggested sharing resources with developing worlds. They argued for protecting planets with primitive life. They pushed for peaceful exploration instead of military expansion. And in every case, the other council members voted against them. The Krathari wanted to expand their military control. The Vorthak were focused on their scientific supremacy. The Zalani only cared about trade profits. Smaller species followed the lead of these major powers, hoping for protection or economic benefits. Theorix watched as human representative Sarah Chen made passionate speeches about cooperation and shared prosperity. He saw the tired look in her eyes as proposal after proposal was rejected. He noticed how the humans gradually spoke less in meetings, their contributions becoming shorter and more formal. The last session before their disappearance had been particularly harsh. The humans had proposed a plan to help the Rimmer worlds develop clean technology. The proposal would have cost the major powers some profits and military advantages. So they voted it down immediately. "The humans sit in this council because we allow it," General Krathos had said during that meeting. They should remember their place and stop trying to dictate policy to their betters. Theorix remembered how Sarah Chen had looked at that moment. Not angry, not hurt, but resigned. She had simply nodded and said, "We understand the council's position perfectly." Those were the last words any human had spoken in the galactic community. As Thyrix reviewed more data, he discovered something that shocked him. The humans had been quietly reducing their presence in galactic affairs for almost 2 years. They had slowly moved their populations from outer colonies to more central worlds. They had reduced their trade agreements and military partnerships. They had been preparing for this exodus while still attending council meetings and fulfilling their duties. They planned this, he said to Kellen the next morning. For 2 years they were preparing to leave us and we never noticed. But why leave without saying anything? Kellen asked. Why not announce their intentions or negotiate better terms? Thyrix pulled up more recordings, these from informal gatherings and private meetings, because we never listened when they did speak. Look at this. The recording showed Sarah Chen at a diplomatic dinner 6 months earlier, talking quietly with Ambassador Thyrix himself. She had expressed concerns about the Council's direction, about the growing military tensions and the refusal to help developing worlds. I told her that humans were too emotional about these issues, Thyrix said, his voice heavy with regret. I said they needed to be more practical, more realistic about galactic politics. Now he understood. The humans had tried to communicate their concerns through normal diplomatic channels. They had made their positions clear in every vote and every speech. But the other species had dismissed their viewpoints as naive idealism. The morning brought more disturbing news. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for decades were breaking down. Computer systems across the galaxy were experiencing errors. Scientific research projects were stalling. Military operations were facing unexpected supply problems. The humans must have been involved in more systems than we realized, reported Vex, the trade minister. Our economic models are showing significant disruptions. General Krathos was even more concerned. 3 of our military campaigns are reporting serious logistics failures. Systems we thought were Krathery designed apparently had human components. By the end of the second day, the scope of the problem became clear. Humanity had been deeply integrated into galactic civilization, but so quietly and efficiently that other species had forgotten their contributions. They had designed software, created communication protocols, mediated trade disputes, and solved technical problems. When they left, they took all of that knowledge and capability with them. The empty seats in the council hall suddenly seemed much larger. The silence where human voices used to offer alternative viewpoints felt oppressive. The galaxy had not just lost a member species. They had lost their conscience, their mediators, and their most innovative problem solvers. And the worst part was that the humans had never said goodbye. They had simply decided that the galaxy was better off without them, and they were better off without the galaxy. As Ambassador Thyrix stood in the empty human section of the council hall that evening, he realized that the greatest tragedy was not that the humans had left. It was that they had felt they had no choice but to leave without a word. 3 months had passed since the humans vanished, and the galaxy was starting to feel the pain of their absence. What had begun as confusion and curiosity was becoming a crisis that touched every corner of galactic civilization. General Krathos stood in the command center of the Krathari flagship Iron Dominion, staring at tactical displays that made no sense. His war against the hive clusters, which had been progressing smoothly for years, was now falling apart. Supply ships were getting lost. Battle formations were breaking down. Weapons systems were malfunctioning at critical moments. What is the status of our logistics network? He demanded from his chief of operations. Commander Vex, a scarred veteran of many campaigns, looked uncomfortable. Sir, we have discovered that our entire supply chain management system was built on human-designed software. When they left, they took the source code and all the maintenance protocols with them. Krathos felt his temper rising. Impossible. That system was designed by our best engineers. Our engineers designed the interface, sir. But the core algorithms that calculate optimal routes, predict supply needs, and coordinate timing across multiple star systems were human creations. We hired them as consultants 20 years ago and never bothered to learn how their systems worked. The general's claws scraped against the metal railing as his anger grew. Find alternatives. Use older systems. We tried, sir. Our older systems cannot handle the complexity of modern operations. We are fighting across 12 star systems with thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. The human software made it look easy because it was incredibly sophisticated. Without it, our commanders are struggling to keep even basic supplies moving. The situation was even worse than Vex admitted. Across the Krathari military, the absence of human technology was causing chaos. Battle computers that had worked perfectly for decades were now producing strategic plans that failed in practice. Communication networks were experiencing delays and errors. Even the environmental systems on many ships were having problems because they relied on human-designed efficiency protocols. On the scientific world of Vorthak Prime, Ambassador Theorix was discovering similar problems. The great research institute that had been the pride of his species for centuries was grinding to a halt. Dr. Naleth, the head of theoretical physics, brought Theorix the devastating news during their weekly meeting. "Ambassador, we need to discuss our research crisis." "What crisis?" Theorix asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. 40% of our active research projects have stopped completely. Another 30% are showing major delays and problems. Dr. Naleth activated a holographic display showing their research portfolio. Red warning symbols covered most of the projects. We discovered that many of our most important breakthroughs in the past century were built on human theoretical work. They published papers and shared knowledge freely, so we never realized how dependent we had become on their insights. The Quantum Tunneling Network project, which had been Vorthak's most promising technology, was completely dead. The human physicist Dr. Jennifer Park had been a key contributor, and when she vanished with the rest of humanity, she took critical understanding with her. "What about our consciousness transfer research?" Theorix asked about another major project, also halted. The mathematical models we were using came from a joint paper written by our Dr. Keth and the human neuroscientist Dr. Michael Rodriguez. Dr. Keth admits he never fully understood Rodriguez's contributions, and now we cannot continue without that knowledge. Theorix felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. How many of our scientists work directly with humans? Nearly all of them at some level. Humans were involved in almost every major scientific collaboration in the past 50 years. They were excellent at connecting ideas from different fields and solving problems that stumped specialists. The economic situation was no better. Trade Minister Vex of the Zalani was facing the collapse of several major trade routes that had functioned smoothly for decades. The problem was not just the loss of human business, though that was significant. The real crisis was that humans had served as neutral mediators in countless trade disputes. The Korath and the Benali are refusing to use the same trade stations, Vex explained to the Emergency Economic Council. They have hated each other for generations, but human diplomats always found ways to keep their business relationships working. Now they are demanding separate facilities, which doubles costs and reduces efficiency. Translation was becoming another major problem. Humans had developed communication protocols that allowed dozens of species with completely different language structures to work together. Their translation systems went beyond mere word conversion to help different cultures understand each other's concepts and intentions. The crystalline entities and the gas giant dwellers cannot effectively communicate without human translation matrices, reported the Galactic Communications Director. Their thought processes are so different that standard translators produce meaningless results. Captain Jules, who had been leading the search for humanity, brought back more disturbing news from his exploration of human worlds. "We have teams on 15 different human colonies now. The pattern is always the same. Perfect preservation of infrastructure, but complete removal of anything specifically human." He showed holographic recordings of empty human cities. The buildings stood intact. The power systems still worked, even the public parks were maintained by automated systems. But every personal item, every piece of human art, every family photo had vanished. It is like they erased themselves from history while leaving the infrastructure behind as a gift, Captain Joel continued. But there is something else. We found evidence that they were planning this evacuation for much longer than we thought. "How much longer?" asked Ambassador Theorix. "At least 5 years, maybe longer. We found construction records showing they built massive transport ships in secret, hidden shipyards in asteroid belts and empty systems. They were not just preparing to leave. They were preparing to take their entire civilization with them." This revelation sent shockwaves through the remaining council members. The humans had not made an impulsive decision to leave after the last council meeting. They had been planning their departure for years while continuing to participate in galactic society, contribute to joint projects, and fulfill all their obligations. Dr. Naleth made another disturbing discovery while analyzing human research contributions. "They were not just participating in our science," he told Theorix privately. "They were guiding it. Look at these patterns." The holographic display showed decades of research developments across multiple species. Human contributions appeared in almost every major breakthrough, but always as supporting work or collaborative elements. They were sharing advanced knowledge while making it look like our own discoveries. Dr. Naileth continued. This quantum resonance equation that we thought Dr. Keth developed 5 years ago? It is based on principles that the human Dr. Chen published in a minor journal 8 years earlier. She presented it as speculative theory, but it was actually a fundamental breakthrough. You are saying they were more advanced than they appeared? Much more advanced. They were teaching us while making us think we were learning on our own. When they left, they did not just take their current knowledge. They took the guidance that was driving our entire scientific development. Meanwhile, the military situation was getting worse. Without human logistics software, the Krathari campaigns were failing. The hive clusters, sensing weakness, began expanding more aggressively. 3 minor wars between council members erupted when human mediators were no longer available to prevent conflicts from escalating. General Krathos was forced to admit to the council that his military was facing its first major defeat in centuries. We need human technology to maintain our defense capabilities. Without it, we cannot protect the outer colonies from hive expansion. Trade Minister Vex reported similar problems. Economic productivity is down 18% across all major trade routes. We are seeing increased piracy because our patrol networks relied on human coordination systems. As the crisis deepened, one question haunted every council member. If the humans were so important to galactic civilization, why had they been treated as junior partners? Why had their voices been ignored and their contributions taken for granted? Ambassador Therick spent long nights reviewing historical records, trying to understand how the galactic community had made such a massive mistake. The evidence was clear. Humans had been quietly holding galactic civilization together through their innovations, mediation, and problem-solving abilities, and the Council had dismissed them as idealistic newcomers who needed to learn their place in the cosmic order. Now, as systems failed and conflicts erupted across the galaxy, that cosmic order was collapsing. The humans were gone, and the remaining species were discovering just how much they had depended on the people they had taken for granted. 6 months after humanity's disappearance, the Galactic Council faced its worst crisis in recorded history. What had started as inconvenience was now threatening the survival of galactic civilization itself. Ambassador Thyrix called an emergency session as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The great hall that had once been filled with confident voices now echoed with desperation and fear. The empty human section seemed to mock the remaining representatives as they struggled with problems they could not solve. General Krathos delivered the military report first, his proud bearing replaced by barely controlled panic. The hive clusters have broken through our defensive lines in the outer rim. Without our logistics systems, we cannot coordinate a proper counterattack. 3 colonies have been overrun, and 7 more are under direct threat. The hive clusters were an ancient enemy, insect-like creatures that consumed entire worlds to feed their ever-growing population. For 50 years, the combined military might of the Council had kept them contained in a small sector of space. Now they were spreading like a plague across the galaxy. How long can the remaining defenses hold? Asked Trade Minister Vex, his antenna twitching with nervous energy. Without reinforcements and proper supply coordination, maybe 2 months, Krathos admitted. Our forces are fighting bravely, but they are running out of ammunition, fuel, and spare parts. Ships are being abandoned because we cannot get repair crews to the right locations. The military crisis was only part of the problem. Dr. Naileth had spent months investigating the scope of human involvement in galactic technology and made discoveries that shocked even him. We have been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our technological infrastructure, he reported to the stunned council. The results are catastrophic. Humans were not just contributors to our technology, they were the foundation that everything else was built upon. He activated a massive holographic display showing the interconnected systems that kept galactic civilization functioning. Red lines marked every component that had human involvement. The display was almost entirely red. Early warning systems for solar flares, asteroid impacts, and spatial anomalies were all designed or improved by human scientists. They integrated these systems so smoothly into our existing infrastructure that we never realized they existed. Ambassador Thyrix felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean, early warning systems? For the past 30 years, humanity has been quietly preventing disasters across the galaxy. Solar flares that should have destroyed communication networks were deflected by human-designed magnetic field generators. Asteroid impacts that should have devastated populated worlds were prevented by human-operated defense systems. Dimensional rifts that could have torn holes in space-time were sealed using human technology. Dr. Naileth highlighted several specific incidents. Remember the natural deflection of the Korath asteroid 5 years ago? It was not natural. Humans used gravity manipulation technology to change its course. The fortunate solar wind that prevented radiation damage to the Vorthak research station? Humans created that wind using their weather control systems. The council members sat in stunned silence as the scope of humanity's secret protection became clear. They had been living under an invisible shield, protected by a species they had treated as inferiors. There is more, Dr. Naileth continued. We found evidence of 17 major catastrophes that humans prevented in the last decade alone. Gamma-ray bursts, quantum cascade failures, even the expansion of black holes. They were monitoring and protecting the entire galaxy. Trade Minister Vex spoke up with his own devastating news. Economic analysis shows similar patterns. Human mediators were preventing trade wars from escalating into actual conflicts. Without their intervention, we now have 3 active military disputes between council members. The Korath Empire and the Benelli Federation had declared war over mining rights. The Crystal Collective was threatening the gas giant alliance over trade route access. Minor species were choosing sides and the galactic community was splitting apart. How did we miss this? Asked Representative Zalar of the Aquatic Worlds. How did they hide so much involvement in our daily lives? Therix had been asking himself the same question for months. The answer was both simple and damning. They did not hide it. We simply never paid attention. We saw humans as junior members who should be grateful for their inclusion in galactic society. We never bothered to understand what they actually contributed. The investigation had revealed the true nature of human involvement in the Council. They had not been the idealistic newcomers that other species believed. They had been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, quietly guiding and protecting everyone else while pretending to be students learning from their betters. Captain Joule brought the most disturbing news of all. His exploration teams had been searching human space for 6 months, looking for any clue about where they had gone. What they found challenged every assumption about human capabilities. We discovered construction sites in deep space, he reported. Massive engineering projects that dwarf anything in Council technology. Humans were not just living on planets. They were building artificial worlds, moving stars, and manipulating space-time itself. The holographic display showed images that seemed impossible. Entire star systems had been reorganized. Planets had been constructed from asteroid fields. Stars had been moved into new orbits to provide optimal energy for inhabited worlds. This technology is centuries ahead of anything we possess, Captain Joule continued. We found evidence of faster-than-light communication networks that span the entire galaxy. Energy generation systems that use quantum mechanics we do not understand. Even gravity-controlled technology that could move entire solar systems. Ambassador Thyric stared at the images, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. If they had this technology, why did they live on ordinary planets? Why did they use standard council ships and weapons? Because they chose to, Captain Joule said quietly. We found personal logs left behind by human engineers. They deliberately used inferior technology when dealing with other species. They wanted to fit in, to be part of the galactic community, even if it meant hiding their true capabilities. The implications were staggering. Humanity had possessed the power to dominate the galaxy completely. They could have conquered every other species with ease. Instead, they had chosen to participate as equals in a democratic system, contributing their knowledge and protection while pretending to be ordinary. Dr. Naileth added another piece to the puzzle. We analyzed the pattern of their departure more carefully. It was not random or hurried. They spent years gradually moving their most vulnerable populations first. Elderly, children, and disabled individuals were evacuated in the early phases. Essential personnel and infrastructure remained until the very end. They were protecting their own people while maintaining their obligations to us, Therix realized. Even while planning to leave, they continued to prevent disasters and maintain the systems that keep our civilization running. The council session lasted for hours, as the full scope of the crisis became clear. Without human protection, the galaxy was facing natural disasters that no one else knew how to prevent. Without human mediation, the council was fragmenting into competing factions. Without human technology, even basic infrastructure was beginning to fail. Representative Zalar asked the question that everyone was thinking. Can we contact them? Can we negotiate their return? Captain Joule shook his head. We have tried every communication method known to council science. We have broadcast messages to every corner of the galaxy. Either they are not receiving our signals, or they are choosing not to respond. The truth was becoming obvious to everyone in the hall. Humanity had not left because of a single council decision or a moment of anger. They had left because they realized that the other species would never see them as equals, never appreciate their contributions, and never share their vision of cooperative galactic civilization. As the session ended, Thyrix remained in the Great Hall, staring at the empty human section. The silence was deafening. For decades, human voices had offered alternative perspectives, suggested compromises, and pushed for solutions that benefited everyone rather than just the powerful. Now those voices were gone, and the galaxy was tearing itself apart in their absence. The hive clusters were advancing. Trade wars were becoming shooting wars. Natural disasters were striking without warning. The technological infrastructure that supported billions of lives was slowly failing. The Council had spent so long taking human contributions for granted that they had never learned how to maintain galactic civilization without them. They had dismissed human idealism as naive, not realizing that it was that idealism that held the diverse and often hostile species of the galaxy together. As Thyrix finally left the empty hall, he understood the bitter irony of their situation. The Council had always believed they were teaching humanity how to be part of galactic society. In reality, humanity had been teaching them how to be civilized, and the Council had failed the lesson. Now the teacher was gone, and the students were discovering just how much they had never learned. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council authorized the largest search operation in recorded history. Ambassador Thyrix had convinced the remaining members that finding humanity and negotiating their return was the only hope for galactic survival. The search fleet consisted of the best ships from every major species. General Krathos commanded the military vessels, despite the ongoing war with the hive clusters. Trade Minister Vex provided logistics support through his commercial networks. Dr. Nalith led the scientific investigation teams. They pooled resources that should have been used for defense and survival, gambling everything on the hope of bringing humanity home. Captain Zul took command of the exploration division, leading them into the unexplored regions where his scouts had found evidence of human activity. What they discovered there would change the Council's understanding of humanity forever. The first major finding came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station Far Reach, positioned at the edge of Council territory. Ensign Kayla, a young Vorthak scientist, detected energy signatures that should have been impossible. "Captain, you need to see this," she called Jewel to her station. "I am reading massive gravitational disturbances in the outer dark region. Something is manipulating space-time on a scale I have never seen before." The outer dark was a region beyond the galaxy's edge, containing only empty space and a few scattered stars. No known civilization had ever shown interest in such a barren area. But the readings suggested massive construction projects spanning multiple star systems. Captain Jewel ordered the fleet to investigate. What they found when they arrived defied every law of physics and engineering that Council science understood. An entire star system had been reorganized. 3 red giant stars had been moved into a perfect triangle formation, their combined energy being harvested by structures that stretched across billions of kilometers. Planets had been constructed from asteroid belts, each one perfectly positioned for optimal energy collection. Space itself seemed to have been folded and shaped to create transportation networks that could move objects instantly across vast distances. "This is not possible," Dr. Nalith whispered as he studied the readings. The energy required to move a single star would drain the output of entire civilizations. But they have moved 3 of them. Commander Vex studied the construction patterns with his engineer's eye. "Look at the efficiency. Every component serves multiple purposes. The gravity fields that hold the stars in position also create the space-folding networks. The energy collection systems also provide environmental control for the artificial planets. This level of integration is beyond anything we have ever imagined." Captain Jewel ordered probes sent to investigate the structures more closely. The results showed human design patterns, but evolved far beyond anything humanity had revealed during their time in the Council. "The materials are familiar," reported the probe analysis team. "Carbon nanotube structures, quantum-stabilized metals, energy-matter conversion systems. But the scale and sophistication are incredible. A single one of these energy collectors could power our entire civilization for millennia." As the fleet explored deeper into the region, they found more evidence of human mega-engineering. Entire nebulae had been converted into manufacturing facilities. Black holes had been modified to create stable wormhole networks. Even empty space had been restructured to provide faster-than-light communication across galactic distances. The scope of human technology became clear when they encountered the first active human installation. It was a monitoring station orbiting a reorganized pulsar, clearly designed to observe Council space from a safe distance. "We are detecting active scans," reported the sensor officer. "They know we are here." Before Captain Joule could respond, a new contact appeared on their displays. A single human ship, sleek and elegant, approached the Council fleet. It was unlike any human vessel they remembered from their time in the galactic community. The design suggested technology that could bend space around itself and manipulate energy in ways that seemed magical. General Krathos, commanding from the flagship Iron Dominion, opened communication channels. "Unknown human vessel. This is General Krathos of the Galactic Council Fleet. We request immediate dialogue regarding humanity's return to galactic society." The response came quickly, the voice calm and professional. "General Krathos, this is Captain Maria Santos of the human vessel New Horizon. We have been monitoring your approach. What brings the Council to our space?" "We need humanity to return," Krathos said bluntly. "The galaxy is falling apart without your contributions. The hive clusters are winning. Our technology is failing. Our civilization is collapsing." There was a long pause before Captain Santos responded. "General, humanity appreciates the Council's recognition of our former contributions. However, we must decline your request for our return." "You cannot decline," Krathos snapped, his military instincts taking over. "The survival of billions of innocent beings depends on your assistance." "General," Captain Santos's voice remained perfectly calm, "you are in no position to make demands. Please observe. What happened next demonstrated the vast gap between human and Council technology. Every weapon system on every Council ship simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply unable to target anything. The ships themselves remained functional, but their ability to act aggressively had been completely neutralized." "How did you do that?" Dr. Naleth asked over the communication channel. "We convinced your targeting systems that there are no valid targets in this area," Captain Santos explained. "Your weapons are functioning perfectly, but your computers cannot find anything to shoot at. This effect will wear off when you leave our territory." Captain Joule realized the implications immediately. "You could have done this to any Council military force at any time." "Of course. But we chose cooperation over domination. When cooperation failed, we chose isolation over conquest." Ambassador Thyrix, monitoring the conversation from the Council flagship, finally spoke. "Captain Santos, we realize now that we made terrible mistakes. We took your contributions for granted. We ignored your wisdom. We treated you as junior partners when you were actually our teachers and protectors." "Ambassador Thyrix," Captain Santos replied, and there was warmth in her voice. "We remember you as one of the more reasonable Council members. Your recognition of our contributions is appreciated, but it comes too late." "Too late? Why?" The human captain's explanation cut to the heart of the Council's failure. "For 50 years, humanity tried to build a better galactic civilization. We shared our knowledge freely, mediated your conflicts, protected you from dangers you never knew existed, and offered alternatives to the endless cycle of competition and warfare that has defined galactic politics for millennia." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We were not naive idealists, Ambassador. We were a civilization that had learned to move beyond the mistakes you are still making. We offered to teach what we had learned, but you saw our teaching as weakness and our wisdom as foolishness." Dr. Naleth asked the question that haunted all of them. "If you were so advanced, why did you participate in our primitive political system?" "Because we believed in the potential of what the Council could become. We saw species that could learn to cooperate instead of compete, that could share knowledge instead of hoarding it, that could protect the weak instead of exploiting them. We were willing to hide our capabilities and work within your limitations because we thought we could help you grow." "And now?" Thyrix asked quietly. "Now we have grown beyond the need for your approval or acceptance. We have found our own path among the stars, building the kind of civilization we always envisioned. We no longer need to convince anyone else to share our values." Captain Joule understood what she was really saying. "You have given up on us. We have given up on the Council as it currently exists, but we have not given up on the potential of the individual species within it. When you are ready to build something better, when you have learned from your failures, perhaps we will speak again." General Kratos made one final attempt. The hive clusters will destroy everything if you do not help us stop them. Captain Santos's response revealed another layer of human planning. General, the hive expansion was contained by human technology for 50 years. We left safeguards in place when we departed. The clusters can advance to a certain point, but they cannot reach your core systems. You have time to learn how to defend yourselves properly. How much time? That depends on how quickly you learn to work together instead of fighting each other. The safeguards will last longer if you stop wasting resources on internal conflicts. As the conversation ended, Captain Santos delivered humanity's final message to the Council. Ambassador Thyrix, tell the Council that humanity thanks them for the lessons they taught us. You showed us that some civilizations are not ready for the responsibilities that come with advanced technology. You taught us that sharing knowledge with those who will not appreciate it is ultimately harmful to both teacher and student. The human ship began to withdraw, but Captain Santos added one final thought. When your species learn to value cooperation over domination, wisdom over pride, and protection over exploitation, we may meet again. Until then, we wish you well in finding your own path. 2 years had passed since humanity's departure, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the proud civilization that had once dismissed human contributions as naive idealism. The great council chambers that had once hosted debates between dozens of species now echoed with the desperate voices of the few representatives who still attended sessions. Ambassador Thyrix stood before a half-empty hall, delivering what everyone knew might be the final State of the Galaxy address. The numbers he recited painted a picture of systematic collapse that would have been unimaginable when humans still sat in their assigned seats. The hive cluster expansion has claimed 37 worlds in the past 6 months, Thyrix reported to the sparse audience. General Kratos estimates that without significant reinforcement, we will lose control of the entire outer rim within the year. The Krathari military, once the proud defender of galactic civilization, was a shadow of its former self. The loss of human logistics technology had crippled their ability to coordinate large-scale operations. Ships arrived at battle zones without ammunition. Reinforcements reached their destinations weeks after battles were lost. Communication delays meant that commanders were fighting based on intelligence that was often days old. General Kratos, his once proud bearing now bent with exhaustion and defeat, delivered the military report with barely controlled despair. We are fighting a war with the weapons and tactics of 50 years ago, while our enemies have evolved. The hive clusters have adapted their strategies to exploit our coordination failures. The economic situation was even worse. Trade Minister Vex reported the collapse of major trade routes and the fragmentation of the galactic economy into isolated regional markets. Without human mediation protocols, we have been unable to resolve the commercial disputes that are choking our supply chains, Vex explained. The Karath-Benili War has closed the primary shipping lane between the core worlds and the manufacturing rim. The Crystal Collective has imposed sanctions against 7 species over translation disputes. Even basic goods are becoming scarce in some systems. Dr. Nalith provided the scientific report, which was equally devastating. Research productivity has declined by 70% across all major institutions. We have abandoned dozens of critical projects because we cannot understand the human theoretical foundations they were built upon. The quantum tunneling project that had promised to revolutionize galactic transportation was completely dead. The consciousness transfer technology that could have solved aging and death had been shelved indefinitely. Even basic improvements to existing technology had stalled without human insights to guide development. We have effectively lost 50 years of scientific advancement, Dr. Nalith concluded. We are now struggling with problems that we thought we had solved decades ago. But the most devastating report came from Captain Jules, who had been monitoring the continuing disasters that struck the galaxy without human protection systems. The early warning networks that humanity maintained in secret are beginning to fail, he reported. We have experienced 17 major disasters in the past year that would have been prevented if those systems were still operational. The list of catastrophes was staggering. Solar flares had destroyed communication networks across 3 systems. Asteroid impacts had devastated 2 agricultural worlds. A dimensional rift had opened near the Vorthak research station, requiring evacuation of the entire system. We estimate that approximately 2 billion beings have died from preventable disasters since humanity's departure, Captain Jules said quietly. They were protecting us from dangers we never knew existed. The council session was interrupted by an emergency communication from the outer territories. Representative Kalar of the Frontier Worlds brought news that sent shockwaves through the remaining delegates. 3 more species have withdrawn from the council, she announced. The aquatic worlds, the Silicon Collective, and the energy beings have declared independence and formed their own defensive alliance. The galactic community was fracturing. Without human diplomatic skills to bridge the gaps between radically different species, the council was splitting along biological and cultural lines. Oxygen breathers could not effectively communicate with methane-based life forms. Hive minds could not understand individualistic species. Energy beings found it impossible to relate to matter-based civilizations. How many species remain in the council? Thyrix asked, though he dreaded the answer. 15, Kalar replied, down from 43 when the humans departed. The session continued for hours as representatives struggled with problems they could not solve and crises they could not prevent. Every proposal was met with objections based on species-specific needs or cultural conflicts. Without human mediators to find common ground, even basic decisions became impossible. As the session neared its end, Thyrix made a decision that he had been considering for months. With the approval of the remaining delegates, he authorized the transmission of a formal message to humanity. It was a gesture of desperation, but also of genuine recognition. The message was broadcast across the galaxy, using every communication method known to council science. It was addressed not to humanity's government or military, but to the human people themselves. To the citizens of humanity. The message began. The Galactic Council formally acknowledges the magnitude of our failure. For 50 years, you contributed to our civilization with generosity, wisdom, and protection that we neither recognized nor deserved. The message detailed the specific contributions that humanity had made, from the logistics software that had enabled galactic defense to the early warning systems that had prevented countless disasters. It acknowledged the scientific breakthroughs that human researchers had made possible and the diplomatic skills that had held the diverse council together. We understand now that when you offered suggestions for peaceful development and cooperative governance, you were not being naive idealists. You were sharing the wisdom of a civilization that had already learned to move beyond the conflicts and competition that still plague the rest of us. The message included a formal apology for the dismissive treatment humanity had received and a recognition of their status as the most advanced civilization in galactic history. We offer this acknowledgement not in the hope of negotiating your return, but because truth and justice demand that your contributions be recognized. The galaxy is diminished by your absence, but we understand that our failure to appreciate your gifts made your departure inevitable. The message concluded with a promise. The remaining members of the Galactic Council commit to learning from our mistakes. We will strive to build a civilization worthy of the example you set. Whether or not you choose to engage with us again, we will work to become the kind of species that deserves to share the galaxy with humanity. The response came 3 days later, transmitted simultaneously to every populated world in council space. It was not addressed to the government or military leaders, but directly to the people of each species. Citizens of the galaxy, the human message began. Humanity thanks the Council for their acknowledgement of our former contributions. We are gratified that our efforts to help build a better galactic civilization are finally recognized. The message was brief, but profound. We departed not out of anger, but out of sadness. We saw the potential for something magnificent in the diversity of galactic species, but we could not force others to share our vision of what could be achieved through cooperation and mutual respect. Humanity made no promises about returning, but they offered something unexpected: hope. We continue to monitor galactic affairs and we see signs of growth among some species. The current crisis, though tragic, may serve as the catalyst for the wisdom that we tried to share through words alone. Sometimes the most valuable lessons can only be learned through experience. The message concluded with an offer that surprised everyone. For those species and individuals who wish to pursue a different path, who have learned from recent events and genuinely seek to build something better, we remain open to communication. Not as the saviors of galactic civilization, but as partners in creating what could be. The transmission ended with coordinates to a communication beacon in neutral space, along with specific protocols for making contact. Ambassador Thyrix stood in the empty council chamber that evening. Looking at the human seats that had remained vacant for 2 years, the silence was different now. Where once it had been the silence of absence, now it was the silence of potential. 3 species had already announced their intention to contact the human beacon, not to beg for salvation, but to demonstrate what they had learned from their failures. The crisis was far from over, but for the first time since humanity's departure, there was hope that something better might emerge from the ashes of the old system. The galaxy had paid a terrible price for its hubris, but perhaps it was not too late to earn a second chance. The empty chairs remained as a reminder of what had been lost, but they also represented the possibility of what might yet be built by species humble enough to learn from their mistakes. Whether humanity would accept new partners in their cosmic journey remained to be seen. But the offer had been made, and the lessons had finally been learned.